Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we've got some really fun recipes and kitchen projects we're gonna be doing today. Josh's grandparents are coming over for dinner. They live out of state and his mom is coming over. So I am gonna be making them something that I think they're gonna really like. First and foremost, we're gonna make a whole dinner, but the first thing I wanna get started with is getting our strawberry rhubarb tres leche cake in the oven, because this needs to chill all day while I get going on some of the other recipes we're gonna be making for the dinner portion of tonight's dinner. So for years, I have wanted to try to make tamales, and tonight is the night we are gonna make tamales for Josh's grandparents. I wanted to make a tres leches cake to go with the tamales, but I also wanted to make a rhubarb dessert, and I was so glad when I found a recipe that combined the two. So I've got my scale out because I'm gonna weigh all these ingredients. My rhubarb is looking absolutely beautiful out in the garden. And I thought that because it's one of Josh's grandparents' favorites, I wanted to see if I could find a yummy recipe that not only uses what's in season, but also fits the theme of tonight's dinner. So I've got my butter in my bowl. I'm gonna zero that out. Now I'm gonna go ahead and measure out my sugar. And I will link all the recipes that we are gonna be making together down in the description box. Put a little too much sugar. We need 297 grams of granulated sugar. We're gonna get this in our mixer with the paddle attachment, and we're gonna whisk this for 5 minutes. Woo! I'm gonna add just a sprinkling more sugar because we lost some on the counter there.
What the sugar is doing is cutting little air pockets into the butter, and that takes time. So while that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and just clean up the little bit of sugar mess that I made with the mixer, and then I'm gonna weigh out the dry ingredients. This tres leches cake recipe that I'm following does have just your standard cups and spoon measurements, but because I already got the scale out and I'm trying to bake more with the scale, I figured I'd go ahead and just weigh out my all-purpose flour, baking powder, and salt. This recipe has very straightforward ingredients, and so I'm going to go ahead and take just a second to sift these together. And then while this is baking, we will get going on the rest of the dinner. Now, one thing I can say, because we have already enjoyed this dinner, is that these tamales turn out incredible. I am so happy that I finally, dived in to make them, because I will be making them again and again. They turned out so delicious. 2024, I did not realize was going to be the year of really trying to push myself when it comes to recipes I've always wanted to try that felt intimidating, and realizing that they're very approachable.
So I'm gonna scrape the sides down one time, and then I'm gonna keep mixing this for about 3 more minutes. And then we can start adding our eggs. I just got these washed up this morning. This has been mixing for 5 minutes now. It's light and fluffy. The butter's actually lightened up just a little bit in color. So now I'm going to mix in 7 eggs. This recipe calls for a lot of eggs. I'm going to go ahead and count those out so I don't put too many. So we've got 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. This is going to be a beautiful cake with all those yellow yolks in there. And the cake portion is super easy. We're just going to put our dry ingredients in. That's all it takes for the cake portion, but we need to make the soak with the strawberries and rhubarb. But we'll make that while this is cooking in the oven. I may have just tasted a little bit of this batter and it is so delicious. It kind of reminds me of a pound cake. I think as long as everything turns out, this is gonna be a great recipe. So while this is baking anywhere from 35 to 40 minutes, it says, I'm gonna set a timer for 35. I'm gonna go run out and grab some rhubarb. We only need 2 cups of this. Look how beautiful it is. I'm trying to use this in recipes when I can because it is in season and I have abundance of it. So I only need 2 cups. So probably 2 stalks is gonna be more than enough than I need. Rhubarb leaves are toxic. So what I like to do is actually break them out in the garden. I'm gonna go throw these later today when I run out into the garden onto the garden beds, and I like to use those leaves as beautiful mulch. Set those there, bring these inside. I just washed this rhubarb up. We don't need an exact measurement because you'll see as we cook this down, we will measure it after we cook it down. But I don't need this for a while, so I'm gonna get this put back over here. We are going to top our cake with a whipped cream, and so I'll need that at that point. But for now, I've got my rhubarb washed up here. Just gonna cut the ends off, put that in a compost bowl. And I'm gonna grab out a pot because we are going to need to cook this down. We need about 2 cups of rhubarb, which I think is honestly one of these stalks would have been more than enough.
With the extra rhubarb, we end up making a rhubarb lemonade Arnold Palmer, and I'm going to show you how I make that in a little bit. And that ends up being a delicious drink to go along with tonight's dinner.
If we get a little extra, that's going to be okay. I think I'm just going to cut one of these stalks up. I'm gonna go ahead and get this on the stove. And now I'm gonna go ahead and add the next ingredient, which is 2 cups of strawberries. And I'm just gonna eyeball this. It doesn't have to be exact. And again, you'll see why in just a minute. If you don't have access to rhubarb or you don't like rhubarb, I bet you could substitute just strawberries. And instead of doing 2 cups of rhubarb, 2 cups of strawberries, you could probably go ahead and just do 4 cups of strawberries. These are some strawberries that I put up last year from a local farm, and it is the last bag I have. So it's good that we're using it up so that I can hopefully get some more strawberries in the freezer from this year's harvest. So to that, I'm gonna add some sugar. And we're just gonna let this cook until it creates a very soft sauce. And then what we're gonna do is actually run it through a fine mesh sieve. And we're basically going to make a strawberry rhubarb juice that we're gonna mix in with our milk, and then we're gonna pour this on top of the cake. I think it's gonna be pretty delicious. So while this is cooking, let me see what I should do next. Actually, while this is cooking, let me show you what I did this morning. Before I got ready for the day, I went ahead and put the meat on so that it could be nice and tender when we're ready to make our tamales. Now it says that this has been doing a natural release for 15 minutes, but the button is still up. I do not want to release this manually because I don't want all of this going all over my kitchen. So we'll let this sit here while I look at my recipes and figure out what we're gonna be doing next.
When I was researching tamale recipes, it seemed like there was so many different options you could do for filling. But one that kept coming up and up was a shredded pork with a chili sauce. And so I definitely wanted to try that. We're going to make 2 different types of tamales, but the first thing I wanted to do on this day was actually get our pork cooked. And this is a pork loin that I got from a local farm, and I put this out to thaw the night before, and so it's thawed and ready for me this morning. And when I was researching recipes, a lot of recipes said to slow cook it on the stove or in the oven or in the crock pot so that it was nice and shreddable and tender for you. Well, I knew that we wanted to be eating this dinner on this night that I was going to start the pork. So what I did is I'm actually going to use my Instant Pot to cook this so that we can cook it a little bit quicker in the pressure cooker, and it's going to be tender and shred apart and delicious. So this is a pork loin, and there was quite a bit of fat on it because it's from a pasture-raised hog, and so there's a little bit more fat on it than if I was to buy this at the grocery store, and I didn't want all of that in my final shredded pork. So I did cut a little bit of that off, and then I cut it into cubes so that it would cook quicker in the Instant Pot. And then I am seasoning it with salt and pepper. And we are going to sear this on the stove until we get a nice dark crust on the pork, so that that's going to add some really delicious flavor to our tamales. Now, when I was researching the flavor profiles, a lot of the recipes showed how to make a homemade kind of like enchilada sauce base, where you take dried chilies, you toast them, you boil them, and you blend them with onions and garlic and spices. Well, I have that I made not last summer, but the summer before, homemade enchilada sauce, where I basically did that step and I put it in a jar, and it's been something we've been enjoying for a very long time. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to use my homemade enchilada sauce to flavor this pork. And if you wanted to try making tamales, but you felt a little intimidated by the process, I was intimidated by it, but it really is super, super simple. And it's something that we're going to be making more and more because the flavor was absolutely incredible. So once I browned up these pork pieces, I'm going to get them in the Instant Pot, and then I'm going to brown up some more. I wanted to do this in a couple different sessions in the pot because I didn't want to overcrowd my pan, because I wanted to make sure I got a beautiful, beautiful sear. And if you overcrowd your pan, sometimes you can steam the pan or steam the meat instead of get a sear. Now, I also wanted to brown it because I wanted these brown bits in my Instant Pot. You can sear in your Instant Pot, but I knew that I'd be able to do this step a lot faster if I did it on the stove, so I decided to do it on the stove. I'm also going to add some onions and shallots, a ton of garlic, and one of my jars of homemade enchilada sauce. I can link that video down below if you want to see how I jarred up homemade enchilada sauce. And then we're going to add our water with all of our pan drippings, and then I'm going to put this to cook for quite some time so that this will be ready for us once we're ready to make our tamales. So now that I've got this going, I'm going to go get ready, and then we'll be back in the kitchen.
So now that we've got our pork going, our cake going, we're gonna get going on the filling for the roasted poblano and cheese tamales. So I'm gonna get my large cast iron on my stove piping hot, and while that is getting nice and hot, we can go ahead and wash our poblanos. I've never actually done this where I've taken the skins off peppers before. I have seen this done a lot of times, but I've never actually done it myself. So this is gonna be kind of fun. A lot of firsts today. And poblano peppers they're kind of all like groovy. So it's gonna take just a second to get them all nice and scrubbed up. I figured once we would get the filling part of the tamales done, then we can get going on the masa part, the corn part. So when I was doing all my reading on tamales, from what I understand is you can really kind of fill them with whatever you want. And so that's why I thought it'd be fun to do a pork one and a pepper one. And there's kind of three parts to the tamale. There's the paper skin part that we're gonna prepare, the corn husks. Then there's the filling, and then there's the masa. So we're gonna get going on the second filling now. And I should probably stir this because it is boiling now. That already smells incredible. And then we're gonna get these blistering on our cast iron. This is the third time I have had Josh's grandparents over for dinner, and you have come along for the ride. The first year they came over, We made pierogies, and it was an amazing dinner, homemade pierogies. The dough was from scratch, the filling was from homegrown onions and potatoes, and then we made a homegrown zucchini chocolate cake. I can link that video down below if you want to see that after you see how these tamales and cake turn out. And then last year they came over, and I had Josh's siblings and grandparents and his parents over, and we had just a fun barbecue. So it's kind of fun. This is kind of becoming a tradition now where I have Josh's grandparents come over for dinner when they're in town. Now the recipe I'm following says to do it in a cast iron, but I've also seen where people just put it directly on their burner. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and try both methods at the same time. This is the one I had on the burner. I think that would have worked well if I had tongs, but my tongs are in the dishwasher. So I think the cast iron is the way to go. The peppers and sauce are still cooking away on the stove, but I think our cake is done. Yes, perfect. It smells heavenly. So we're gonna get this out of the oven and we're gonna let this cool down. And I don't think we're gonna need the oven anymore, so I can go ahead and get that turned off. Now I can see that our Instant Pot has released its pressure. So let's take a look and see if our pork is tender or if I need to cook it a little bit longer.
I pulled it apart with just a fork and it's super tender, so we're going to get it out of the Instant Pot so that it can cool a little bit so we can shred it up.
It smells so good. I want to save this broth and flavor, but I don't want all the excess fat in it, so I'm going to get this straining through my fat separator. So now I'm going to go ahead and cover these so that it traps the heat and they steam, and hopefully the skin will want to come right off the pepper. So now we officially have the beginnings of both of our fillings in the works. Now the two recipes that I'm kind of getting inspiration from for the fillings for both these tamales show you how to make a homemade, basically enchilada style sauce to cook the pork in, and to make a homemade salsa verde to saute and mix in with the peppers. But I happen to have homemade jarred stuff that I made the previous year out of homegrown things, so I am adapting those recipes and using them as inspiration for making these two versions of tamales. But if you don't happen to have your own jarred enchilada sauce or salsa verde, you could either go to the store and pick up some already made stuff, or follow the recipe that I'm gonna link down below, because that will show you how to go ahead and make it the day you make your tamales. So now what we're gonna do is actually make a strawberry rhubarb syrup. So we are going to strain our strawberry and rhubarb through a fine mesh sieve to get basically a simple syrup with the rhubarb juice and with the strawberry juice that we're going to flavor our milk mixture that we're gonna pour over the cake. Now I think I have more than I need, and so what the recipe says is if your liquid mixture ends up being more than the recipe calls for, then once you strain it, get it back on the stove and reduce it till you get that amount, which will increase the delicious flavor. Concentrate it, basically. My bowl is a little too small. That's what I think I'm gonna do, because I know I'm gonna need to pour this back in this pot. I'm gonna get most of it, then I'll just strain it right into the pot. And then I'll put this back on the stove until it reduces down by half, probably, because I have way more than I need. So I need this to reduce by about half, so I'm gonna get this back on the stove and we're gonna let this cook down. Now I wanna add some of this liquid back to our pork once we shred it, but I wanna concentrate it just a little bit. So I'm gonna put my Instant Pot on the saute mode. And now that the majority of the fat has separated out, it's right on the top, I can pour this in here and I'm gonna let this reduce to concentrate that flavor. That will come up to a boil shortly. I have some water heating in the kettle so that we can get our corn husks softened. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and get 2 of our milk products ready to soak our cake in. So this is 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, and then I have 1 can of evaporated milk. That's why I washed the top of the lid off. I'm gonna put a little bit more water on this, but I gotta get it up to a boil. So in the meantime, our rhubarb has reduced. So I'm gonna grab the cake now. We are going to add our 1 can of sweetened condensed milk to the rhubarb. I tasted this rhubarb syrup and it is pretty tart, which is good because sweetened condensed milk obviously has a lot of sweetness to it, so that'll help balance that flavor. And I'm gonna let this kind of melt the sweetened condensed milk in that hot rhubarb mixture. And while that's doing that, I'm gonna poke holes in our cake just using a fork. Now I'm gonna add our second milk mixture, which is our condensed milk. I'm gonna taste this. Oh yeah, that's good. My water was boiling, so I figured I would go ahead and get more water on top of our corn husks. What I'll probably end up doing is rotating these because my pot obviously is not deep enough for all of those corn husks. This tastes so yummy. This is gonna be a great light cake. So we're gonna get all of this onto the cake. And this is only 2 of the milk products we're gonna be putting on this. We're gonna be putting on top whipped cream. I'm gonna go pop this into the refrigerator, and it needs to chill for at least 5 hours, it says, before we put the top on. Right now, it seems like there's quite a bit of liquid still on the top. I also think it needs that time to absorb that beautiful strawberry rhubarb milk mixture. I had this reducing down and I think it's nice and thick now, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel my poblano peppers. You can see how the skin is just coming off. I'll need to take the seeds out, but I'll do that after I get all the skins peeled.
I let the tamales steam in the bowl probably for about 20 minutes or so they had time to fully steam and cool off so that I could do this. And all I needed to do was remove the skin, open it up, and then I kind of just ran my knife, the back of my knife, along the inside of the pepper so that I could scrape off the seeds. Now we do need to cook some onions, which we're going to slice up in just a minute, and I had alluded to the fact that we are going to mix this with a salsa verde, and we are going to do that, and then we're going to add cheese. Now I went back and forth whether I was going to make two different flavors of tamales. I am so glad I did, because it gave me kind of ideas for future fillings that you could put in tamales and just how creative you really can get when it comes to the flavors that you want to put in it. We loved both of them. I am glad that I did both of them because it was kind of nice to have a pork one that was a little bit more savory, and then this pepper and onion one, which was a little bit brighter because of the salsa verde that we're going to be adding in a little bit. It almost made it perfect to have like a little bite of both in one. It was so delicious. I'm so glad I went through the effort of making two flavors instead of just the one.
I shredded our pork. I'm going to get that into our thickened sauce. I'm going to mix that around. And that's why I wanted to thicken that sauce, so it could coat all that pork and be delicious, but not make the filling too runny. So now we're going to saute these onions until they've got a nice color to them. I'm going to add some salt and pepper. They smell incredible already. I haven't salt or peppered the peppers yet, so I'm going to add enough for when we add the peppers. I tasted this pork and I thought it needed just a hint of sweetness, so I'm going to add about a tablespoon of honey. And then that should make that perfect. And here I have a jar of salsa verde I made with homegrown tomatillos last summer. And we're going to go ahead and get that in here. So I went ahead and I let this reduce by about half. So now our poblano filling is done, other than I need to shred some cheese, and our pork filling is done. So now that our fillings are done, we need to actually make the masa part, which is another part of our filling. Our corn husks are nice and soft. I've been rotating them so that the top ones that weren't submerged in water are now on the bottom, and I've done that about 3 or 4 times. This is the part I've been really wanting to do, is actually make the masa part. And I rendered lard from a hog that I purchased from a local farmer. It's the same hog that I made the pork filling mixture out of. And I put it in the freezer. And I didn't realize I needed it kind of firm. So I microwaved it to melt it. And then I had to wait for it to harden back up in the freezer again, so that we've got kind of a solid lard mixture. So this is lard from a local hog that I rendered myself. It's absolutely beautiful stuff. And so what we're going to do is take 1 1/3 cups of this lard and put it in the mixer, because we need to whip this until it's nice and light and fluffy. And that's why I needed solid lard instead of melted lard like I had not that long ago. So what I'm going to do is get this into our stand mixer using the paddle attachment. I'm going to measure out my 1 1/3 cups. This might still be a little bit on the soft side. So that's 1 cup, because this is a 1/3 cup measure. So what I think I'm going to do, because I think this is still a little too soft, and I don't want to mess this part up, I'm gonna pop this in the refrigerator, actually the freezer, for a few minutes. I need to get going on some dishes, so let me get the dishes going while this firms up, and then we'll be back to make the masa. What I can do is spread this thinner so that it will firm up a little bit quicker. So more surface area. I'm still waiting for my lard to harden up just a bit. So what I decided to do, because I already have my dishes going, I've got all this beautiful produce I just washed up and just did a rough chop on the onions and jalapenos. So I'm gonna make a quick salsa here. And Josh's grandparents do not like a lot of spice. So in the jalapeno that I put in here, I went ahead and cut the ribs off. And we're just gonna make a really simple, quick, and delicious salsa. So I'm just going to pulse this a little bit just to get that started. I also put some more water onto boil because I am going to make a rhubarb iced tea. Fresh lemon juice in here. A little bit of salt. Some cumin. Put the lid on that and pulse it. Probably should have put the cilantro in there. Actually, what I'm gonna do is take that out. I'm gonna put this in the fridge after I mix this together, and then I will taste it for salt and lemon juice after it has time to kind of sit and let all the flavors kind of marry together. So in less than 3 minutes, we have a fresh salsa for dinner tonight. My lard has firmed up now, so it's perfect. So we're gonna go ahead, or at least I think it is. We're gonna get this in our mixer, and we need to mix this with a couple tablespoons of broth. We're gonna end up putting more broth in it, but the first part is to put 2 tablespoons of broth in with our lard. And now we're gonna whisk this, or mix this, for about 4 or 5 minutes until light and fluffy, it says. Look how beautiful, white, and fluffy that looks. It almost looks like frosting. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our masa and a few more ingredients, but we're gonna start with our masa. Masa is a corn product where they take corn and they treat it with lime, they cook it with it, and then it changes the makeup of it, and it makes it more digestible and more delicious. So that's what I have here. It's not just ground up corn kernels, it's masa harina. And I love this particular one. I can link this one down below. I have tried making corn tortillas many times, and with this particular one, I've had the best luck, and they taste fantastic. So I'm excited. I think this is gonna taste really good as well. So now that we've got our masa in there, we're gonna add our baking powder. I'm gonna mix that in at the top. I'm gonna add some cumin for flavor. And salt, I need to grab that. I can't believe how fluffy that lard got, so that's salt. And now I'm gonna mix this together first. And then I'm going to slowly pour in broth until we get a consistency, it said, of spreading like a smooth peanut butter. I'm using chicken broth. The recipe says you can use vegetable, chicken, or beef. So here is our filling mixture. I think that is a good consistency. I don't think I want it any liquidier than that. So what I'm gonna do now is scrape the sides of the bowl, and we can start assembling our tamales now, which is pretty exciting. What the recipe says to do so that this beautiful filling mixture doesn't dry out is I've got a clean towel here that I just ran water under so that it's nice and damp, and so this will prevent it from drying out. Now we can actually fill our tamales. So I've got our 2 filling mixtures, and then I've got some cheese that I shredded up. This is Monterey Jack cheese. And I think I'm gonna grab another cutting board, and we'll make the tamales on the cutting board. And then I'm gonna grab 2 dishes because you can indicate which type is which based on if you tie the tamales or not. I'm not gonna do that because it's gonna take too much time. So I'm gonna put one type of tamale in one dish. Let me go grab them. So let's put the peppers and cheese in the white one. That's how I'll remember, because the Monterey Jack cheese is white. And the pork one is gonna go in the clear baking dish. Okay, so let's start with the pork, because that's only one ingredient, and that's going to be easier. And I've got my corn husks here. I've read the directions a couple times. I've watched the videos a couple times. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm a little nervous. I'm actually, I think, gonna use my cookie scoop so that I can get an even amount of filling. So let's use 2. 1 for the filling mixture, 1 for the corn masa. The recipe says about 1/4 cup, which is gonna be 2 of these scoops. I want the wide side away from me, the skinny side pointing towards me. And I'm gonna spread this on the bottom half . I think it could use just a little bit more. Now I'm going to take about 2 tablespoons of the filling mixture. It said do not overfill. And we're going to fold it in half. In half like the letter, and then up. So that's 1 tamale right there.
I could comfortably fit 3 tamales on my cutting board, so I end up doing 3 at a time from the first one just to be a little bit more efficient. And a lot of the recipes said you could take a little thin strip of corn husk and actually tie the tamale shut, but a lot of the recipes said that was optional, and that is a great way to indicate different flavors if you have multiple flavors that you're going to put in the same pot to cook them. And I just decided not to do it because I didn't want to take the time to do it. But I think that they look really cute when you go through the effort of kind of tying each one. I made enough that in the pot they kind of sat against each other, so they stayed closed without needing to do the tying of them to stay closed.
I did not double the masa mixture. Maybe I should have. I didn't really think about that because I'm making 2 different kinds. So I am going to do an equal number of the pork ones, and then I'm going to go back and do an equal number of the pepper ones because I want to make sure I get an equal number of both. If I have a little extra pork mixture, that's fine. We can find other yummy things to use it with. I have seen some videos where people use like a spackle tool that you would use for like drywall or something like that. And that way you can just go and do one big swoop of masa. And that's supposed to work really well too. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do for the pepper one I'm gonna take peppers. Oh my goodness, I think this one's gonna be so good with the salsa verde in there. And those charred onions. A little bit of cheese.
When I mentioned a while back that I wanted to make tamales, many of you all said that when you make them, you invite your friends and family over and you sit around and you enjoy each other's company while you fill the tamales and get them all made up. I think that that would be super fun. On this day, it was me in the kitchen hanging out with you, trying to learn a new skill. And so I think next time I make this, it would be super fun to have all the fillings made up. So you have your masa made up, you have your corn husk soaking, and then you have, maybe one or two different meats or vegetarian fillings ready to go. You invite your guests over, you enjoy each other's company sitting around a table and filling all these and starting to cook them. I think that in the future, I would like to have a party where I host my friends or family and we sit around and we roll a bunch of them, enough to where everyone can enjoy the dinner, but then can take some home as a party favor. Maybe in the future, that would be a fun thing to do.
So here are our poblano tamales with cheese and our pork tamales. So I'm gonna cover these and pop these in the fridge until we're ready to steam them. And now I'm gonna go ahead and kind of finish up the cake. So I got my KitchenAid bowl clean. And I also want to start tonight's rice dish. I'm not gonna cook it yet until closer to when it's dinner time. It's only 2:43. We're having dinner at 6:30, or at least that's when they're coming over, so we might eat closer to 7. So I just turned this on saute mode because I am going to toast the rice in a little bit of butter. This is my new favorite way to cook rice, is in the Instant Pot and to toast the rice first. I have my dishwasher going and I do have a sink full of dirty dishes. So what I wanna do is I want to empty this before my guests get here so I can load the dishwasher and hopefully run it one more time. And then I pulled out all of my place settings so we can get the table set for tonight. Okay, we're gonna call that good. And while that's toasting, because this is gonna take a few minutes, I'm gonna get the whipped cream made for the cake. So this is just some heavy cream here. I'm gonna add some vanilla. So I'm gonna pop this back in the fridge. So the rice is getting nice and toasty. Once it's fully toasted, I'm just gonna turn this off and then I am going to put in some tomato juice. I do have one kind of question mark on how exactly I'm gonna cook these because I don't have a steamer basket. So this is what I was thinking. I can use my Dutch oven with canning rings on the inside, laying on the bottom. I might have to do 2 rows in order to get them high enough off so I can have some water at the bottom because these are to be steamed. So I think I could go like this. I need one more. Let me just see if this is gonna work.
Up until this point, I had not fully thought through how I was going to cook these. When I was watching all the videos and reading all the recipes, I was really only looking at how to make them and not how to cook them. I don't know why I didn't go that far. So this is kind of what I was thinking all morning. I am going to just use some canning rings because I don't have a collapsible steamer. And I quickly realized this is not going to work. And so I end up just setting this to the side and I realize I need to think this through. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do when it comes to cooking them. I do know that I can make up this rhubarb Arnold Palmer and I can set the table. So I am going to mix our iced tea concentrate with a rhubarb simple syrup. So all I did was boil that extra rhubarb I had with equal parts water and sugar. I put that into our tea concentrate. I filled the rest of it up with ice. I put in some spears of rhubarb and then I topped it with quite a bit of fresh lemon juice that I had in the freezer. I just thawed that and mixed that together. An Arnold Palmer is just iced tea and lemonade, and I made it iced tea rhubarb lemonade by using a rhubarb simple syrup, and it turns out delicious. Now, I have some table decor things that I have collected from different parties, and I end up just setting the table. And while I'm setting the table, I'm trying to think through, how am I going to cook these tamales? I didn't really want to go buy any special equipment for it, and so I thought, you know what I should do is I'm going to go ahead and watch a few videos, and I'm not going to watch just about the filling portion. I'm going to actually watch all the way through the cooking portion of it. So here's what the table's looking like. We decided to eat outside because it was a perfect 73-degree day, and so I wanted to enjoy the beautiful weather. So I will link the video that I ended up following on the cooking process because it ends up working out really, really well. And I'm going to share with you what I come up with to cook these tamales without buying any special equipment. Now, I did want to decorate our cake, so I washed up some fresh strawberries. These are beautiful. Strawberries are definitely really delicious right now, at least in my area, because it is just the beginning of strawberry season. And all I did to decorate the top of this cake is I took a couple strawberries and I just sliced them, keeping the stem intact and not cutting all the way through so that I could kind of fan them out. And I end up putting 6 strawberries on the top just to add a little bit of something to the top. I originally wasn't going to do this, but I happened to have some strawberries in my fridge, and I thought, why don't we make this a little bit more festive? So I'm going to pop that in the fridge, and dessert is completely done. Now we're going to go ahead and cook our tamales using the method that I saw online. So this is my canning pot. It is a 23-quart pressure canner pot. We're not going to pressure can these tamales, but we are going to use this huge pot to steam them. So what I did is I put 3 quarts of water in the bottom of this pot, and that's why my Dutch ovens and things were not going to work, because I need a lot of water because these are going to take a long time to steam, and I don't want my pot to boil dry. So I needed a tall, big pot. So this is what I saw the lady do in the YouTube video that I looked up, that I will link down below, because I followed her cooking method and it worked really, really well. So I put 3 coffee mugs turned upside down in the bottom of this pot. I put 3 quarts of water in the pot. I then put my rack in the bottom. I put a bowl in the center, and I stacked my tamales around that bowl. And then we turn the stove on and we have this come up to a simmer. Now, one thing I did not do is I did not save my extra corn husks. I put those in the compost before I realized I should have saved those and put those on the top and then covered it with a towel. I didn't have the corn husks anymore. I already composted them, so I just put 2 towels on the top of my tamales and I let that steam with the lid on. Now that we have our tamales cooking, I am going to change my focus over to the rice that we started earlier. I turned it back on saute mode and I wanted to toast some spices. So this is some homemade taco seasoning. I put about 3 tablespoons of that in there. That does not have any salt in it, so I did sprinkle a little bit of salt in that. I toasted up the spices for just a minute, and then I added my tomato juice. When I can my tomatoes, I like to separate some of the liquid or tomato juice off the tomatoes so that they thicken up faster. And I don't just have that evaporate. I do have a nice tomato product that I can cook rice in. And so that's what I'm using to cook this rice. Instead of just plain water, I'm going to use the tomato juice for a little extra flavor. And I'm just going to hit the rice button on my Instant Pot. And that was 3 cups of rice, 2 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of taco seasoning, a pinch of salt, and then 4 cups of tomato juice. So now that we've got that going, I put a bowl of chips out, and I end up putting the chips on the table with the salsa so that as my mother-in-law and her husband and my grandparents or Josh's grandparents come over, they can snack on chips. Now, when it comes to cooking these tamales, the recipe that I was following, the written recipe for the filling mixture, said to cook them for about 30 minutes. The video that I watched said that if you have a lot of tamales in a pot, it can take up to an hour. And this took an hour and 15 minutes because I had so many in this pot. And so that was something to note, that The time can really depend on how long they take to cook, depending on how many tamales you are cooking. And I think because the tamales were so high from the boiling water, that also was a factor. So I checked these probably 6 or 7 times as they were cooking, and I cooked them until the paper peeled away from the filling mixture easily. And so I went with my gut, and my gut told me they needed to cook for about an hour and 15 minutes. And so that's how long they cooked for. So the rice is done. I get that out of the pot. I get some fresh lime juice on it. I had chopped and washed up some fresh cilantro and green onions, and that is ready to serve along with our tamales. So here is the whole dinner together. We've got our 2 tamales with our rice. I have some sour cream, some hot sauce out. On the table, I have the rhubarb iced tea and the chips and salsa. Friend, I highly recommend you make these if it's something you have wanted to try. They are a little bit time consuming, but they aren't difficult, but they are delicious. So worth the effort. Thank you, friend, for hanging out with me as we made yet again another delicious dinner. If you want to see how I made homemade pierogies, I will put a video here. You can watch me make homemade pierogies for Josh's grandparents. And if you want to see how I made a barbecue for his grandparents last year, I'll put it right here. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.